Welcome to CIHT Podcasts.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Justin Ward, and today I'm with Lila Tachtsi, the Director of Transport Asset Management at Atkins. Lila was Project Director for the UK Roads Liaison Group Guidance, Well-Managed Highway Infrastructure, published in October 2016. Authorities have until October 2018 to adopt the new code, including the risk-based approach. So we are checking in on progress towards this. In the road sector, we have been talking about asset management for about 15 years. How much will the risk-based approach change asset management?
Thank you, Justin. First of all, can I say thank you very much for inviting me to share this discussion with you. You're right, asset management in the road sector is a mature business. It's not something we started yesterday. And we've always seen something like a risk-based approach, a big part of asset management. But as the sector has matured, as we started understanding better what are the challenges as well as the potential benefits of asset management, we now know that the risk-based approach is something that is not going to happen. It needs a bit of effort. And in the way what it's going to do to change asset management is it's going to make it more pragmatic. So it's going to be the gap between everything we've done so far around guidance and good practice and bring it down to a level that will be applicable on the day-to-day practices in asset owner organizations. To start the risk-based approach and make it success, we really need to start with a review of where each authority is to really understand what the gaps are, and then setting up the hierarchy. Having the right functional hierarchy in place is critical to the success of the risk-based approach. Everything else hangs from the hierarchy.
So that's the first step.
That's the first step, absolutely. Absolutely. Trying to implement a risk-based approach without a hierarchy is not going to work. That's all.
And how do we bridge the gap between the theory and the practice?
That's a really good point. We have focused for quite some time on things like developing asset management plans. More recently, we focused on developing an asset management policy and a strategy, communication plans, and so on. I think it is very important now to bring together everything that has been developed around the theory, around the high-level stuff, and bring it down to a practical, operational level. If we go back and remember what we did with the Highway Infrastructure Asset Management Guidance, which was also published by the UK Roads Liaison Group, what we did there is we put a bit of focus around the context within which asset management is delivered. I think we made huge progress on that, particularly with the incentivized funding and the work that Department for Transport did around that. So I think we now have a much clearer vision of where we're going to go with asset management. What is still lacking is bringing it, as I said, down to the operational level. So if we know what the vision is, if we know what the constraints are, and if we know what the end game is, the risk-based approach gives us the opportunity to work with stakeholders in asset owning organizations and bring the theory in practice. So we don't talk only about efficiencies or about life cycle plans, but we can be very specific about how these efficiencies will be implemented. Understand what the risk around them is, understand what is the appetite for that risk and how it's going to be managed on a day-to-day basis. And I'm trying desperately to think of an example different to inspection regimes, because this is the one we always talk about, but I can't think of anything else at this point in time, so we'll talk about inspections if that is okay.
Yeah.
We often talk about understanding the hierarchy of the network and making that part of our asset management plan, but this code now, this risk-based approach, gives us a real opportunity to look at the network hierarchy, understand what is the use of this network hierarchy and how it helps us to deliver the vision of the organization, and therefore come up with an inspection regime that reflects the risk to deliver the vision. So we don't need to go and inspect the entire network at exactly the same frequency or with using exactly the same techniques. We can understand the risk and adjust our inspection regime to reflect the risk on the network.
Yeah, it's been generally well received by the sector, and I think the degree of sophistication has been something that they've welcomed. But what are the blockers? Why might people be reluctant to move towards the new risk-based approach?
I agree with you 100% that the sector welcomed that. As you know, we were involved in quite extensive consultation to develop the risk-based approach, and I don't recall anybody saying no, we don't want the risk-based approach. The debate was more around how much detail we include in the guidance, how open is the risk-based approach, what guidance do we provide about it. So I think everybody welcomed the idea of a risk-based approach. What are the blockers? I think there are two different types of blockers. The first one is the risk that is associated with the risk-based approach. We talked about it in the past, and even the previous code talked about it. But in reality, we have been quite conservative, and we have been avoiding the risks. And therefore, we know that this new approach will introduce some unknowns into the equation. So I think some of us in the sector are a little bit reluctant to try something new, so that is a blocker. Having said that, the new guidance gives us permission to go a bit more innovative, a bit more daring about the things we do. So that hopefully will be addressed. I do see the lack of skills as another blocker. I do see the lack of skills and the lack of capacity as well in some of the organizations a blocker. This isn't going to happen overnight, and that's why we had 2 years from publication to full implementation of the code. It's not going to happen over time. People need to put a bit of effort to assess the risk, understand what are the capacity of the organization, understand what is affordable and what is not. Remember that for the first time, we do raise the issue of affordability in the code, and we've got to be careful about that. I don't think anybody says you stop doing highway maintenance because it's not affordable. The opposite. We are saying through a risk-based approach, we have the opportunity to understand better what is affordable and what is not, and therefore come up with policies and practices that are affordable and will allow us to meet our target. So I think skills and capacity is a blocker, and we are working with the Department for Transport and CIHT to try to increase the level of skill that is available to do that. And of course, learning from each other, encouraging authorities to work with each other to review where everybody is going is something that will help this situation. And
collaboration between authorities is something that is happening as a result of the new code.
Absolutely. It's happening as a result of HMEP, I've got to say, but I think the code has further encouraged people or authorities to work together on very specific problems. Collaboration is great, but sometimes it's difficult to achieve because it's high level and unclear what the end game is. Whereas when you have a very specific problem around the hierarchy, around inspections, around flooding, around resilient networks, if the problem is specific, then it makes it easier for people to start the conversations and then grow them out of that. Some of the authorities we work with, we can see that they work much better together now. They have a plan and they have ideas about how to share what they are doing with the new code, and that's great to see, actually.
The 2010 severe winter period probably gave a start to that quite focusedly in terms of the resilient network and how you collaborate with your neighbouring authorities and salt stocks and so on. So it was kind of you have to collaborate, but fortunately that's continued, I think.
Yeah, no, it has continued. It's a good point, yeah.
And there was perhaps a focus when the code was being developed that it was focused on local highway authorities, but recently Transport Scotland and Highways England are interested in the risk-based approach. And why do you think that is? Yeah,
and the Welsh Government, we had a discussion I'd say only, but it's now a couple of months back. And Transport Northern Ireland is looking at the risk-based approach. Why that is? Because risk-based approach is fundamentally a big part of asset management when we talk about holistic asset management. So I don't think local authorities would ever be the only owner of a risk-based approach. I think as Highways England is understanding better the requirements of the licensing agreement and the relationship with the DFT and the ORR, they have more flexibility to make some decisions that they couldn't make in the past. They are obviously more free to make their own decisions now and set their own vision, their own targets, understand better the risk and how they're going to manage it. So I think Transport Scotland, in a different different way, came to the same conclusion. They published their AMP, it's over a year ago now actually. They have done a lot of work to embed asset management on their day-to-day practices, so they understand better where there is flexibility to apply the risk-based approach. So it's the obvious thing to do. And we must remember that the risk-based approach is not a road sector unique thing. It happens across all asset infrastructure.
So utility sector,
energy sector in buildings. It's something that is it's happening. Water, in the water industry, something that happens everywhere. I think we've got a bit more a higher level approach in the road sector. We looked at it more holistically, perhaps because when we started looking at the detail of the risk-based approach, we were already quite a mature asset management sector. So I think that helped us to make a bigger picture approach.
And authorities that you've had experience of working with, do you feel that there's an enthusiasm there in terms of moving more firmly towards a fully risk-based approach?
Two different questions. Do they enjoy and are they enthusiastic? They're enthusiastic. Absolutely. I haven't worked. At the moment me and my team were working with more than 20 authorities to look at the risk-based approach and the new code. I don't think I can mention any authority that doesn't have the enthusiasm. Do they enjoy it? I don't know about enjoy, but definitely enthusiasm. Yes, it's something people wanted to do. Look, Justin, I don't think any authority ever wanted to avoid the risk-based approach, but there were some nervousness around about being exposed to legal action if they moved away from the previous code of practice. So the new code of practice just simply gives authorities permission to go on and do what they've always wanted to do, but to do so in a systematic and methodical way rather than just randomly start changing things. Remember that we had the support of the legal profession and the insurance industry behind us in developing the code to make sure that whatever we wrote wouldn't cause problems. Of course, there is always room for interpretation. There is always room for changing things to suit one authority's priorities, but we are not alone. It's not just road engineers and highway maintenance engineers steaming ahead to make a change in the risk-based approach. We really have worked together as a sector and all of the stakeholders of the sector. So I think we're in a good place.
Good. Well, thank you very much. And it'll be interesting seeing coming back in October 2018 and feeling where we are as an industry, perhaps if there's been any case law since then. Yes. On the implementation.
I think it's a bit early still for case law because the changes are happening now, but you've got a very good point. And we are approaching the first anniversary of the publication of the code, so it will be good at that point to take a step back and think, what have we achieved in a year? How much more have we got to go? But look forward to ongoing support from the sector and CIHT to try to develop the skills and share the knowledge.
Thank you, Lila. Thank you for your time again. You've been listening to a podcast with Lila Tachtsi, a Director of Transport Asset Management at Atkins and Project Director of the UK Roads Liaison Group Guidance, Well Managed Highway Infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you.